And the debate which we've organised this evening called "Should Capitalism Have a Future?", which of course we in the Socialist Party think it shouldn't. Depends on the majority of the working class whether that changes or not. The first speaker, John Meadowcroft, will speak for about 20 minutes, and then our second speaker, our party member Richard Headicar, will speak for 20 minutes. They'll wind each other up for about 5 minutes each, and then we'll have questions and discussions for about 45-50 minutes. And at the end of that time, we'll have another little winding up session for the two speakers. We have the room till 10 o'clock. Should be a space at the end of the evening to have a look at the literature which we have at the back of the room, a really nice array of different literature that's quite useful. Notification of our meetings, which we hold regularly at our head office in Clapham High Street, and you can speak to any party members around, ask for information and help on the subject. Okay, I hand over to John Meadowcroft now.
Well, thank you very much. It's very, very good to be here today, and I'd like to thank Socialist Party of Great Britain for the invitation to speak to you about should capitalism have a future. I have to walk on here to my own. Well, I found on the internet a flyer for the event, which I've put up here for you. It seems, according to this, I'm defending war, poverty, disaster, environmental devastation, famine, exploitation, so clearly I've got a hard job to do to defend all these things. Now, hopefully I'm going to demonstrate that capitalism doesn't mean these things. In fact, it means quite the opposite. And it's the absence of capitalism that really leads to famine, devastation, exploitation, and lots of hardship for lots of people. Before I go on to that, I want to answer some preliminary questions. The first one, and probably the most important one, is what do we mean by capitalism? Capitalism in terms often bounded about, but it's very underdefined. If you look at Marx, for example, oddly enough, in my view, it doesn't say very much about what we actually mean by capitalism, about what is capitalism, what isn't capitalism. Well, one way of defining capitalism is to say that it means the private ownership of the means of production. But if we look at societies we might call capitalist, we can see wide patterns of ownership. For example, in the UK, 48 pence out of every pound is spent by the government. I mean, the government is a huge economic player in this country. And if you look at other societies that we might call capitalist, again, the government plays the principal role in the economy. If you look at parts of the UK, Northern Ireland, Scotland, the government is the principal player in those economies. In Northern Ireland, 77 pence of every pound is spent by the government. And that's a huge amount of money, clearly more than the Soviet Union, more than in Mussolini's Italy, more than Nazi Germany. So we have, if you like, a role of the state that's unprecedented. It's bigger than it's ever been before. So if this is capitalism, I can't imagine what socialism might be.
We'll tell you.
I'm sure you will, yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing. Now, what I don't want to do today is defend the status quo in this country. I think probably what I've just outlined suggests that it's not a status quo that really will satisfy me. Rather, what I want to do is to defend a particular model of capitalism, or a particular model of free markets, perhaps. And that's a model in which the state plays a very basic role, where the state provides a framework of private property rights and the rule of law, and perhaps also sound money. So we know that money can be provided privately, as it has been done in many places and many times. But usually we say that the state provides money, that's a role for the state. And within this framework, we have a whole variety of different sorts of enterprises. We have like big multinational organisations like BP, like Shell, those sort of big companies. We also have perhaps partnerships like John Lewis. We have then smaller enterprises like a newsagent or a small chain store. So it means lots of different things. It means lots of different types of organisation. We're in a framework, as I say, provided by government. Now, the second question I want to address is, by what criteria should we evaluate capitalism? Now, I want to argue here that we need to avoid a fallacy. It's a fallacy that's quite common in economics, and it's called the Nirvana fallacy. Now, the Nirvana fallacy is when you compare a real-world alternative to perfection. So we say, here's a real-world alternative, capitalism, and it doesn't mean perfection. It's not perfect. That's called the Nirvana fallacy because, unless I'm mistaken, perfection or Nirvana isn't achievable here in the real world. So what we have to do if we want to have a serious analysis is compare capitalism with the real-world alternatives. So capitalism clearly is imperfect. Certainly not going to argue it's perfect. I want to argue that it's more desirable than all the real-world alternatives. So we may think that capitalism has its failings, which I'm going to outline some of them today, but against the alternatives it's preferable. So the alternatives have more or worse failings than capitalism. That's going to be my central thesis today. So just to reiterate, it's going to be a relative judgment, so a relative evaluation of capitalism against socialism. I want to begin, I want to just focus this analysis on two areas, because obviously 20 minutes isn't very long, so not much time really to work through lots of different issues. So I want to focus on two issues, two areas. One is poverty and development, so global poverty. The second one, if I get time, will be equality. If I don't get time for equality, I'm sure it'll come up in the discussion later. Well, talking about poverty, hopefully most of you can see the graph there. Economic historians, people who research economics, publish in peer-reviewed journals, have developed lots of good data on poverty and on development. And I've represented here a summary of that data from a book by Angus Madison called The World Economy. And what this shows basically is world GDP per capita for the last 2,000 years. So it begins in 1 AD and it ends in 2003 AD. And what we see there, you can't see very much basically, what you see is almost nothing. From 0 AD right through to about 1800. Basically you have nothing. You have people living in absolute poverty. People living in, if you like, desperate states, hardship, constant famines, constant impoverishment, grinding poverty. Really a very awful time for everybody. Then around 1800, suddenly you get this huge upsurge. Suddenly in different places, people start to get wealthy, people start to get rich. And I think we'd all agree, because this is what Marx said, we'd all agree that the cause of that change was capitalism. Around about 1750, 1760, beginning in London, if you like, even the UK, and perhaps Edinburgh too, we saw the development of commercial society, we saw the development of global capitalism. And it started to rise, the first time it started to raise large numbers of people out of poverty. And in a sense, there's no cause of poverty. Poverty is a normal condition of mankind. If you look at any historical scope, that's the clear fact. Most people, most of the time, in the history of the world, have been poor. But a very small number of people, for a very small amount of time, have developed wealth. And those people have developed wealth because of capitalism. I have to say, I looked on your website today and just picked out one quote. It says on your website, apparently, the world socialist movement is a global socialist movement that believes that capitalism cannot meet the needs of the majority of us, the workers or the proletariat of the world. Well, I certainly dispute that, but what's clear is that capitalism's done a better job than any other economic system at meeting the needs of all people. Prior to capitalism, everybody was poor. Everybody had poor education, poor healthcare, low life expectancy. After capitalism, most people in capitalist societies have had a huge improvement in their standard of living. Huge, greater life expectancy, greater healthcare, better education, more leisure time, opportunity to travel. All the good things in life have come from capitalism. Now let me dig down a bit deeper. Well, the history of